I'm curious of your take on what's happening right now. And I want to zoom in on a specific region, which is sense making in general. And this is news media, this is people's testimony or just talking to each other. This is what people believe is going on in the macro. And we'll just use America because we're both here. What's happening there in the sense-making ecosystem that's making it so wonky? On one hand, you have legacy media and institutions. It feels like their propaganda dial is being turned up. It's almost like they're like, okay, more and like more egregious things that people, even people who've never questioned anything, never took the red pill, are starting to question. They're like, wait, this is ridiculous. This is getting a little ridiculous. And on the other hand, you have a proliferation of rebel radio, podcasters, independent thinkers, all these folks coming out of the woodwork and being like, no, there's an alternative perspective to this. And here it is. And it's actually very well studied and backed by evidence. And there's all these people that have been doing this for a long time that are now emerging. And there's a proliferation of conspiracy theories or all this stuff about what's really going on. And I feel like since COVID, I mean, it's 2024, we're recording this the end of November. In the last 4 years, it feels like that has happened and the information ecosystem has broken down more than all of the, like, as long as I've been alive. I was born in 89. Since, like, I can't imagine another time where that was happening, although I'm sure it was. Maybe I wasn't paying attention back then, but what is your read on what's going on? Like, is this part of the plan? Is this part of the process? Is there some new force emerging? Because it's like, it affects everything, right? It affects politics, the conscious community. It affects, the stuff we're dealing with in our work. I'm sure it affects your colleagues and the people you talk to every day.
Yeah, good question. Big question.
So this question is a whole podcast on its own, right?
Yeah, at least one. Whoever at any given point in time is sort of controlling the narrative for the majority of the population, like rewind way back and it was the church, like the Christian church at one point, like coming out of the Dark Ages. They had like a monopoly on like narrative information. So the printing press scared the shit out of them because it democratized that and they're going to lose their control of it. Okay, so today, whatever groups, let's call it like corporate controlled media, in my opinion, that's what the main monopoly on narrative is. And then there's maybe partnerships between big tech and government and whatever. I'm not even saying their intentions are bad. I'm just saying that they're the ones that have the monopoly on the narrative. Well, you have a proliferation of social media and stuff. 1,000 ways. It's like the printing press all over again. And they're fucking terrified. So they're reacting to that. And they're doubling down on the only thing they know how to do. And so on one level, I think that's what's happening. That's part of it. When you see all this polarization and stuff of people, you have a main narrative, like this is the official story on this thing, right? So you're going to have at least two groups of people in relationship to that. And those groups of people are determined because we're in a society right now where most people are still, the level of emotional development is not at its full potential yet. One way to say it. They're acting like children. And so their response to that parental authority giving the main thing is a reflection of their relationship with authority that was developed in their childhood. So you have people that are getting behind it and scolding anyone who doesn't do what mom or dad says. And you get people that are rebelling diametrically to it. That's the polarization. If we had a society of people who were emotionally mature at an adult level and psychologically at an adult level and had dealt with those things and that shadow stuff or whatever you want to call it, you wouldn't see that kind of polarization happening. But in between those two groups, there's a third group. And that's a group that's pretty small. But those are the people who aren't just reacting emotionally and then out of a cognitive bias, they're either getting behind or standing against whatever the mainstream narrative is. You have these people actually looking at it and saying, is this true? Is this not true? What's going on? And they're questioning it. And with those people, sometimes they get behind it. They decide it's true. And sometimes they get against it. But when they do, they're not part of one of those other two groups. So they tend to get like rejected from those other two groups, both. Whatever group thought they were one of them is going to feel betrayed because they're not on their side about it. But they weren't taking sides with mom or dad. Like they were just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I break it up. Makes sense?
And there's a way in which the father mother projection of external authority figure and the transference that's happening there, it's very like psychoanalytic. I think about this a lot. In a
Yeah.
sense, the American left, the Democratic Party, let's say, for convenience, is mom, and the American right, the Republican Party's dad, like in the very traditional old school way of like, dad says we should do this and like no nonsense. And like mom's very caring and nurturing. It's like, let's think about everyone. Let's be inclusive. Like that polarity, that duality binary has almost played out perfectly in this election cycle, especially. It's kind of wild to think about how many people like NPCs, non-player characters, they're just like, I'm for the current thing, or I oppose the current thing. And I've seen you comment on social media, and myself, I do these experiments a lot on social media in the town hall of the internet. It's like clockwork. Pick any issue. Like you don't even have to do the crazy ones like Trump or abortion or like war, foreign policy. Just like very benign issues like the price of groceries, like something simple. Without fail, those two groups you described will instantly form in comment sections or like
Yeah.
public forums, like instantly, like clockwork.
It's tragically predictable. It's so boring. But that's what politics is today, at least, is predicated on. You know, it uses that predictability to maneuver things. Like that's what it relies on. If that predictability went away, politics would fall apart, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's like a fuel for this sport team, like who wins, who loses, kind of
Yeah.
zero game.
We're
And
seeing it because of all the media available today. We're seeing it reflected back to us. But I think it's always been going on as long as humans had egos.